In the heart of the Wild West, a poor woman shows kindness to a weary stranger, but what happens next will change her life forever. Watch till the end to see the shocking twist. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Where are you watching from? Let's get started. The Texas sun had long disappeared behind the jagged hills, leaving the land bathed in a cool, dusty twilight. The wind whistled across the dry plains, rattling the wooden fences of the Dawson Ranch. Inside the small house, Clara Dawson moved quietly, her worn hands steady as she stirred a pot of soup over the flickering fire. Her father's old portrait hung on the wall, his proud face reminding her of better days when the ranch thrived and laughter filled these empty rooms. Now only the sound of the wind and her heartbeat broke the silence of her lonely nights. She had spent the entire day mending fences and feeding the last of her cattle, their ribs showing through thin hides. Money was tight, and each passing season only worsened her troubles. Still, she carried herself with quiet strength, the kind built by hardship. The nearest town, Amarillo, was 30 miles away, and she rarely made the trip anymore. The cost of feed, oil, and supplies had risen beyond her reach, yet she never gave up hope. The land was all she had left, and she loved it fiercely. Outside, the storm clouds gathered thick and dark. As lightning flashed over the plains, Clara heard a faint knocking sound echoing through the wind. She froze, unsure if her mind was playing tricks. But then, another knock, louder this time. She cautiously reached for her father's old shotgun, the metal cold in her hands, and stepped toward the door. "Who's there?" she called out. For a moment, there was only the hiss of rain, then came a weary voice. "Ma'am, I mean no harm. Just looking for a place to stay till the storm passes." Clara hesitated, her instincts torn between caution and compassion. When she finally opened the door, she saw a tall man standing in the pouring rain, his clothes soaked and boots caked with mud. His wide-brimmed hat was pulled low, but when he looked up, she saw eyes that carried a strange depth, blue, tired, but kind. "Come in," she said at last, stepping aside. The man nodded gratefully and entered, shivering slightly as the fire's warmth reached him. "Thank you, ma'am." "Name's Jake," he said softly, removing his hat with respect. The house smelled faintly of herbs and smoke. Jake glanced around but said nothing as Clara poured him a bowl of soup. He ate slowly as if savoring every bite. Clara noticed his hands, rough but not like a laborer's. His speech was polite, his posture calm, almost gentlemanly. "You traveling far?" she asked. Jake gave a small nod. "West," he said simply. "Been riding for days. Left everything behind. Just needed a roof and a warm fire." His voice carried a sadness that made Clara curious, but she didn't pry. The rain grew heavier, drumming against the roof in steady rhythm. Clara sat across from him, sipping tea while the flames flickered between them. She had not shared a meal with anyone in months, and the quiet company felt comforting. "Not many folks open their doors to strangers anymore," Jake said after a while. "The world's gotten colder," Clara smiled faintly. "Out here, kindness is all we've got left," she replied. Her words made Jake pause. "You remind me of someone I used to know, a woman with the same heart. She saved my life once," he murmured, staring into the fire. Clara tilted her head, studying him. There was something about Jake that didn't fit the picture of a poor traveler. His manner was too calm, too measured, like a man who'd once known power and lost it. "You talk like someone who's seen a lot," she said quietly. Jake smiled, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Maybe I have," he answered. "Life's got a way of teaching lessons the hard way." The air between them grew thoughtful, filled with the warmth of the fire and the soft hum of the storm outside. Hours passed, and fatigue began to settle over them both. Clara offered him a blanket and a spot near the hearth. "You can rest there for the night," she said. Jake stood, hat in hand. "You've done more than I deserve, ma'am." "I'll remember this kindness." She brushed off his gratitude. "Just get some sleep." "Morning's always better after a storm." Jake smiled gently. "You've got a good soul, Miss Dawson." The way he said her name made her pause. She hadn't told him it. She frowned slightly, but before she could ask, he had already turned toward the fire. As the night deepened, Clara sat quietly at the table, her thoughts racing. How did he know her name? Perhaps he had seen it carved on the barn gate or on an old sign by the fence. Yet something about the way he spoke it, soft, familiar, made her uneasy. She tried to dismiss the thought, convincing herself it was harmless. The storm outside began to ease, and the sound of Jake's steady breathing filled the room. Clara's eyes grew heavy, but curiosity lingered like a shadow in her heart. Who was this stranger really? By the time dawn began to paint the plains in pale gold, the storm had passed. Clara awoke to an empty chair and a cold fireplace. Jake was gone, leaving behind no trace, except for a folded piece of paper resting neatly on her wooden table. Her fingers trembled slightly as she reached for it, not yet knowing that this small, silent note would change her entire life by sunset. The morning light filtered through the dusty windows of Clara's cabin, painting golden streaks across the floorboards. The smell of wet earth lingered after the night's storm. She rubbed her sleepy eyes and looked around. Jake's blanket was neatly folded, his cup washed, and the firewood stacked by the door. For a man who claimed to be poor and weary, he had left behind a strange sense of grace. Clara sighed, thinking he had gone quietly like a passing wind. But then her gaze fell upon the small white envelope resting on the table, her name written in perfect handwriting. Curiosity prickled through her chest. She tore it open carefully, half expecting a simple thank you note. Instead, a folded letter and a bank check slipped out, fluttering to the floor. Clara blinked, hardly believing her eyes. The check was real, and written for $1 million. Her breath caught. She felt dizzy, gripping the edge of the table. Who in this world would leave such a fortune behind? She unfolded the letter with trembling fingers, the ink slightly smudged from the damp air, and began to read. Miss Dawson, you showed me kindness without asking who I was or what I carried. The world has forgotten compassion, but you reminded me of it again. My name is Jake Harrison, former owner of the Dawson Mining Company. Yes, the same one your late father once worked for before the market collapsed. I lost my fortune trying to keep families afloat during those dark years. But last month, fate returned what it took away. The old land struck gold again. This gift belongs to the heart that never stopped believing in goodness. J. Harrison. The words blurred before her eyes as tears began to form. She sank into the wooden chair, the letter trembling in her hands. Her father had often spoken of Jake Harrison, the man who had once been admired across Texas for his generosity and fairness. But he was said to have vanished years ago after his business went bankrupt. Clara could barely comprehend it. The poor stranger who had slept beside her fire was the same man once known as one of the wealthiest gentlemen of the Wild West. Clara folded the letter slowly, her mind spinning with disbelief. She looked out across the open fields where the rain had left shining puddles on the earth. Everything felt different now. The same land that once felt like a prison now shimmered with possibility. Yet, beyond the shock and wonder, there was something deeper. Gratitude, humility, and a quiet ache in her heart for the man who had disappeared as mysteriously as he arrived. She whispered softly, "Thank you, Mr. Harrison," though she knew the wind would carry her words into silence. In the weeks that followed, Clara traveled to Amarillo for the first time in months. The banker's eyes widened when she presented the check, and within hours, her entire life changed. She paid off her debts, restored the Dawson Ranch, and hired back workers who had long left for other towns. Her land thrived again, cattle returned, and laughter filled the house. But she never forgot where it all began, with a bowl of soup, a stormy night, and a stranger's tired eyes. Clara began to use part of her newfound wealth to help others in the nearby towns. She built a small schoolhouse for children who had no access to education and funded the repair of a burned-down church. When people asked how she came by her fortune, she only smiled and said, "It was a gift from kindness." She never spoke of Jake by name, but in every act of generosity, she honored his memory. The story of the mysterious benefactor began to spread across Texas, whispered in saloons and marketplaces alike. One summer afternoon, While walking through her ranch, Clara noticed a rider approaching from the distance. The sun glinted off his hat as he drew closer. Her heart skipped. It couldn't be, but it was. Jake Harrison dismounted, his clothes still simple, but his posture proud. "You rebuilt this place?" he said with a faint smile. Clara stepped closer, emotions swirling within her. "You shouldn't have left without a word," she replied softly. "You left me with more than words could ever say," he answered. His voice carried warmth and quiet pride. They sat on the porch as the sun began to dip behind the hills. Jake spoke of how he had wandered for years after losing his fortune, searching for a reason to believe in people again. "Money changes a man," he said. "But losing it, that teaches him who he truly is." Clara listened silently. She had nothing to add. His story was written in his eyes. He told her he would soon leave again, to travel across the West and help others as she had helped him. "The world needs more hearts like yours, Clara," he said gently. When he left that evening, the sky burned with crimson light. Clara watched him ride off into the horizon, the wind carrying the dust behind his horse. She never saw him again, yet his presence lingered in everything she did. The rebuilt fences, the children's laughter at the schoolhouse, the warmth of every stranger welcomed to her door. Years later, when people spoke of the legend of Jake Harrison, the hidden millionaire of the Wild West, they always mentioned a woman named Clara Dawson, whose kindness had turned a lost soul into a living legend. And sometimes, on quiet nights, Clara would sit by the fire, the same way she had years ago, and whisper to the wind. Kindness never goes unnoticed. The flames danced as if they understood. And somewhere in the vast wilderness of the American plains, perhaps Jake Harrison smiled too.